Anyway, let's talk about Canada now. Is Canada now an anti-Christian country? Journalist David KRAYDEN covered the recent trip of American pastor and Christian musician to Canada. Here is his piece that he wrote for the Blaze Media. And when that singer, Sean, returned home this weekend after the start of a short Canadian tour, he did something he'd never done before. He fell to the ground, and then he kissed American soil because he was shocked at the hostility towards Christianity in Canada. When did this happen? Maybe it's happened. I've been blinded to it. I didn't know. Ottawa journalist, independent journalist, David KRAYDEN joins us now to talk about that and more. We're going to talk also about the Freedom Convoy here in a second. But David, this is a part of the story I hadn't heard. You know, we were seeing obviously the persecution of Christians around the world, covering the bombing in Gaza of a Catholic church. This is happening all over the world, but Canada, when did this start happening?
I'm not quite sure when it started happening, but we saw this demonstrated in a very sinister way last week when Sean Foyt, who is a Christian musician and pastor, came to Canada. And immediately he was assaulted by the mainstream media as being MAGA affiliated, quote unquote, as being a friend of Donald Trump, quote unquote, as being extremist, as being divisive. And why? Because he's an evangelical Christian. And he came to Canada not to talk about politics. He came to Canada to preach, to sing, and to worship Jesus Christ as Lord. And that's exactly what happened wherever he went in Canada. Problem was, KRAYDEN, everywhere he tried to go from Moncton to Toronto, the mayors of those cities actively intervened to have his event canceled. So he was forced to seek the assistance of local churches. And that's precisely what happened. Local churches hosted him. So he was able to follow through in a 6-city date, but in every Canadian city, from Moncton to Toronto, the local governments, the local mayors tried to intervene to stop the event from happening. And he's coming back in August, and he's already been told by Winnipeg that he's not welcome at that city's Central Park. However, folk, the great premier of Alberta, a good friend, Danielle Smith, has already said, Sean, you're welcome to come to Edmonton and sing on the stairs of the legislature, of the provincial legislature, because in Alberta, we're not anti-Christian. But apparently in much of Canada, anti-Christian sentiment reigns supreme. Christians are now third-class citizens in much of Canada. And this is a land that was founded by Christians, evangelicals, mainstream Protestants, Roman Catholics. That's who founded this country. And we're now being told, you're not welcome in the public sphere anymore. You can't talk in the public space because you're too divisive. And why is he so divisive? Well, apparently he's pro-life, as I am. He's against critical race theory, as I am. He is opposed to the LGBTQ agenda, as I am. So I don't think that makes him extremist in any extent. It just makes him an evangelical Christian who's principled enough to believe in the Bible. And that's what he's all about. And if you watched the concerts he staged across central and eastern Canada, there were no politics. He wasn't talking about voting for Donald Trump. He wasn't talking about how great the MAGA crowd is. He preached the gospel. And if you watch these concerts, they were just like anything you might see at a Pentecostal church throughout Canada or throughout the United States on a Sunday morning. There was no difference. And this entire episode, KRAYDEN, has disgusted so many Christians to say, you know, we became conditioned to this kind of behavior from local governments during the COVID pandemic. We became used to the police invading our churches, arresting our pastors, clearing out the people from the church, saying, you can't worship here, it's not safe. Why don't you go to a bar or a strip club? It's safer there. You can do that, but don't go to church on Sunday. And we became conditioned to this. And I tell you, the height of absurdity here, Clayton, is when he tried to perform in Montreal, and the woke Mayor Plante of that, Valerie Plante of Montreal, said, "You're not performing in this city. You're far too divisive." A Spanish Catholic church offered him a place to play, and the police invaded that church. They prevented people from coming in. They blockaded the front door until Antifa arrived. And then they decided to perhaps go outside and see if Antifa was causing more trouble. Antifa literally threw a smoke bomb in the middle of the concert at Sean Foyt. The police did absolutely nothing to protect him. And they said at the end of the evening, "Hey, you might have had your concert, but the city's going to fine you people for this." And sure enough, Clayton, the city of Montreal fined that Spanish Catholic church $2,500 for hosting a Christian pastor. Since when, I ask you, do you need a permit? Does a church need a permit to host a pastor or a musician in their church? This is a complete outrage, and this is why I'm saying Canada has become demonic, not just anti-Christian. This is incredibly evil, what happened here last week.
Well, he called it, in fact, Sean, when he returned, he said he saw Canada as being run as a demonic stronghold. That Canada is now a demonic stronghold. I mean, those are his words, not mine. And you're right. I mean, it's unbelievable to see even like the CBN reporting about that $2,500 been hit with that $2,500 fine just for hosting the church service. It's unbelievable. And what are they saying? What was their reasoning for issuing the fine? Like, it's in his views on sexuality, abortion, government overreach, that's a problem for the Montreal government. So he's not allowed to have to perform in a church. We're like, what was their reasoning for the fine and shutting it down?
They had no reason. Absolutely no reason. This is a product of COVID reasoning, which is, we don't have to give you a reason for coming into your church and throwing people out. During COVID, it was for health reasons. During this instance, it was for security reasons. Oh, we're worried that his presence in the city is going to cause some sort of very divisive, controversial reaction. And my response to that was, well, why don't we start banning Liberal Party conventions? Because they're just as divisive and controversial wherever they have a convention. So when did it become illegal to be controversial or divisive? That's really the nature. That's the foundation of democracy, is division, that people don't have to agree on a one-party state solution. People don't have to agree on everything the government tells them. So there's the nature of a democracy is inherently, to some degree, divisive. Yeah. We're not always going to agree on things, but we're supposed to have something called freedom of religion. And I'm sorry, that's evanescent in Canada today.
No, you would think we would have this. Certainly we understand this on the big tech platforms. Like YouTube suppresses our show. YouTube suppresses Tucker's show. YouTube suppresses so many shows that are, that
my show
have your show that run counter. Thank God we have Rumble, because most of our audience is now moved over to Rumble. So we're streaming live right now. We expect that sort of on the big tech platforms. But when you have a constitution, you have a law of the land, for the government to come in there and just shut down freedom of expression, free speech in a church. I mean, this is authoritarian level. I mean, that's what this is to me. This is fascism. That's authoritarian level. You love to throw around the term Nazis. I mean, that's exactly what this is. And the Carney government is allowing and facilitating this. Another piece of this, you mentioned COVID, is the Freedom Convoy sentencing. So you just penned this piece at the Blaze Media, Freedom Convoy sentencing straight from the anarcho-tyranny playbook. And you basically say that Chris Barber and Tamar Lich, two of the main organizers of the 2022 Freedom Convoy, could be locked up for years now. They were found guilty on mischief, which I don't think anyone could even describe what that even was. Mischief. But now they've been awaiting sentencing. I mean, it seems like forever at this point. And they're not up until October, but now word on the street is they could face up to 8 years behind bars. This is outrageous. What do you know?
Well, that's what the Crown Counsel, and for your American viewers, the Crown refers to the prosecution, which is, of course, in this case, the Ontario government. It's not actually the federal. A lot of people think this is Justin Trudeau started this whole thing. He invoked the Emergencies Act, but it was Premier Doug Ford, the faux conservative, the red Tory Premier of Ontario, who has been pushing this prosecution. I was there at this trial from day one, and that was early September, 2 years ago, when this trial started. By the time they get their sentencing on October 7th, it's going to be literally 25 months of lawfare. And of course, we had last week, I went to the trial because I was expecting they were going to have the sentencing last week. I was informed upon arrival that no, this was a sentencing hearing. It was going to be 2 more days of legal padding to put Tamara Leach and Chris Barber through a little more lawfare, a little more hell. And that's what this is all about. But the prosecution revealed at this point their documents stating explicitly they think these people are guilty of extraordinarily criminal, get this, extraordinarily criminal behavior, and that Chris Barber deserves 8 years in jail. Tamara Leach, 7 years in jail. And this is the part that really smacks of Bolshevism. The Crown wants to expropriate Chris Barber's truck, from which he gains his livelihood. But it also happens to be an icon of the Freedom Convoy, and it was nicknamed Big Red. It became symbolic of the whole convoy experience. And this is how vindictive the woke prosecution is. They want to take his truck away and put him in jail for 8 years. And it's absolutely astounding because I tell you, on the same week that the Crown announced that Chris Barber should go to jail for 8 years for organizing a peaceful protest, for cooperating with the police on every opportunity. A couple in Calgary received 6 years manslaughter when their child was killed at their hands. 6 years. Jeez. So you get 8 years, potentially 8 years for mischief, but you're getting off with 6 years for manslaughter. And in some cases, murderers are getting that or less in this country. And this is where I say a narco-tyranny, because that describes a political system that persecutes its political rivals, that persecutes people who dare to question the political narrative of the government. They imprison them, they convict them, they arrest them. But it leaves the real criminals relatively alone. So this is why we have car thieves going to jail for maybe a week and getting out on bail and never being seen again. This is why we have people guilty of various forms of assault getting less than 2 years. And this is why we have killers going to jail for 6 years.
It's like a playboy right out of the United States justice system. We had thugs that beat up these, concert goers in Cincinnati, go into jail, get out on bond, $400, they're out. And then, other individuals spending years behind bars for incredibly small amounts, mischief or misdemeanors or other things like that. Well, we'll be watching it. So October, we have to wait until the sentencing. Is that right?
Well, this is the astounding thing, is that when I spoke to Tamara Leach when the sentencing hearing began, I said, well, when do you anticipate you're going to get the sentence? And how long do you folks have to wait? And she thought, well, probably by mid-August. The judge determined at the end of the sentencing hearing that there would be a 2-month lag. We're going to have to wait literally until October 7th. But in August, they're getting together again. And the Crown is going to put forth arguments on why it should expropriate, or as I like to say, steal Chris Barber's truck. And what possible motivation could they have for that besides sheer vindictiveness and just sheer absolute larceny? It just amazes me how this clown show of a prosecution has even gotten this far with their arguments. There was never anything presented in the courtroom that suggested there was any violence or anything except peaceful protest being wrought by Chris Barber and Tamara Leach. And I have been there virtually for every court date, listening to the so-called evidence from the prosecution. And I have marveled that they were convicted at all. But I marveled that this even went to court, because this is clearly a show trial. This is a Stalinist show trial, and Tamara and Chris are clearly political prisoners. I've taken that line from day one with this trial. I've never treated this as a truly criminal trial. To me, it's a Bolshevik show trial by not only the Doug Ford government of Ontario, but by his good friend, first of all, Justin Trudeau, and now his very good buddy, Mark Carney. They're all in this together, Clayton.
David Krayden, you can read these pieces over at The Blaze. Thank you, as always, David, and follow David on X. He does great reporting up there in Ottawa. Thanks for keeping them honest, David. Great to see you.
Thank you so much, Clayton.
You bet. Thanks, David.